The idea that salt holds protective power has existed across many cultures for centuries, long before modern science or structured religious understanding shaped people's beliefs. In different parts of the world, salt has been seen not just as a seasoning for food, but as a substance with hidden, almost mystical abilities. Some people believe that placing salt in specific areas of the home, like entrances, corners, or near windows, can ward off evil, absorb negative energy, or protect the inhabitants from harm. This belief often stems from the symbolic purity of salt because it preserves food and prevents decay. Many cultures extended that physical property into a spiritual assumption, imagining that salt could also preserve a person's safety or purity from unseen harm. Over time, these ideas became deeply rooted traditions, passed down through generations without much questioning. In some households, especially in parts of South Asia and the Middle East, it is still common to see people using salt in rituals, sprinkling it around, placing it in bowls, or even mixing it in water for a spiritual cleansing. However, when we look closely at these practices, we realize that most of them are not based on any authentic religious teaching, but rather on inherited customs and cultural blending. The problem arises when these cultural practices begin to be treated as if they are part of Islam itself. Islam, as a complete and preserved way of life, clearly defines the sources of benefit and harm. It teaches that no object, no matter how simple or common, has independent power unless Allah has given it that power in a way that is clearly mentioned in authentic sources. Salt in Islam is simply a blessing in terms of sustenance. It is a useful and necessary part of life, but it is not described as a tool for spiritual protection. When people begin to believe that salt can repel evil forces or remove unseen harm, they unknowingly attribute a form of power to something that has not been given such a role by Allah. This can slowly lead a person away from pure reliance on Allah, even if their intention was only to seek safety or peace. The belief that salt removes negative energy is particularly widespread today, especially with the influence of social media and modern spiritual trends. You will often hear people say things like, put salt in the corners of your house to absorb negativity, or keep salt near your door to block bad vibes. These phrases may sound harmless, but they introduce concepts that are not grounded in Islamic teachings. The idea of a negative energy itself is vague and often borrowed from non-Islamic philosophies. In Islam, matters of harm from the unseen are clearly defined. They may come from the evil eye, from envy, or from jinn, but the solutions are also clearly given, such as reciting specific verses of the Qur'an, making dhikr, and maintaining strong faith. Islam does not leave room for ambiguous practices or symbolic rituals that have no basis in revelation. So when someone replaces these clear teachings with practices like using salt, they are, in effect, choosing uncertainty over guidance. Another important aspect to understand is how easily these beliefs spread within Muslim communities. Often they are passed down by elders with sincerity, not with the intention to misguide. A mother may tell her children to put salt in the corners of a room because she herself learned it from her parents. Over time, such practices become normalized and people stop questioning their origins. This is how cultural traditions slowly merge with religious identity, making it difficult for individuals to distinguish between what is truly part of Islam and what is simply inherited habit. The danger here is subtle but serious. Islam emphasizes knowledge and understanding, encouraging believers to ask, verify, and ensure that their actions align with authentic teachings. Blindly following traditions without questioning them can lead to practices that contradict the very foundation of Islamic belief. At the heart of this issue lies the concept of Tawakkul, which is complete trust and reliance on Allah. The Tawakkul does not mean that a person avoids taking practical steps in life, but it does mean that they understand where true power lies. When someone believes that placing salt in their home will protect them from harm, they are shifting a portion of their reliance from Allah to an object. Even if they still believe in Allah, this subtle shift can weaken their understanding of Tawheed, which is the oneness of Allah in all aspects, including His control over benefit and harm. True Tawakkul means turning to Allah alone for protection, using the means that He has prescribed, such as prayer, remembrance, and recitation of the Qur'an, rather than inventing new methods based on cultural ideas. It is also important to reflect on why people are drawn to such practices in the first place. Often, it comes from a place of fear or uncertainty. Life is full of challenges, and the unseen world can feel mysterious and intimidating. People want simple, tangible ways to feel safe, and placing salt in a specific spot may give them a sense of control or comfort. However, Islam teaches that true peace does not come from objects or rituals, but from a strong connection with Allah. When a person strengthens their faith, regularly remembers Allah and follows the sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they develop an inner sense of security that no physical object can provide. This spiritual strength is far more powerful and lasting than any symbolic act. Another key point is the importance of intention versus correctness. Some people may argue that their intention is good, they are only trying to protect their home or family. While intention is indeed important in Islam, it does not make an incorrect action correct. A person may sincerely believe that something is beneficial, but sincerity alone is not enough if the action itself is not supported by authentic teachings. Islam requires both sincerity and correctness. Sincerity in intention and correctness in following the guidance of the Qur'an and Sunnah. This balance ensures that a person's efforts are not only well-meaning, but also truly beneficial in the sight of Allah. Understanding these first two keynotes, why salt is considered protective, and the belief that it removes negative energy, helps to uncover a larger issue within many communities. It highlights the need for awareness, education, and a return to authentic Islamic teachings. When people learn to question the origins of their practices and align them with Islam, they not only purify their actions, but also strengthen their faith. It becomes a process of rediscovering the simplicity and clarity of Islam, where protection is sought through remembrance of Allah, where peace is found in prayer, and where every action is guided by knowledge rather than assumption. As this awareness grows, individuals begin to replace superstition with certainty. Instead of placing salt in corners or near doors, they turn to reciting verses of the Qur'an that are known to bring protection. Instead of relying on vague ideas of energy, they seek refuge in Allah from specific harms that are clearly mentioned in Islamic teachings. This shift not only corrects their actions, but also deepens their connection with Allah, making their faith more meaningful and their hearts more at ease. The influence of cultural traditions versus authentic Islamic teachings is a deeply important issue, especially when discussing practices like placing salt for protection. In many Muslim societies, cultural habits and inherited customs often become so intertwined with daily life that they are mistakenly viewed as part of religion. These traditions are not always harmful in themselves. Some are neutral or even beneficial in a social sense. But the problem begins when they are given religious meaning without any evidence from the Qur'an or Sunnah. The practice of using salt as a protective tool is one such example. It may have originated from older civilizations or neighboring cultures where symbolic rituals were common, and over generations it found its way into Muslim homes. Gradually, people began to associate it with spiritual benefit, even though Islam never prescribed such a practice. This blending of culture and religion can be subtle, making it difficult for individuals to distinguish between what is truly Islamic and what is simply inherited behavior. Islam places great emphasis on preserving the purity of belief and practice. The religion was completed and perfected, leaving no need for additions or modifications based on cultural preferences. When people adopt practices like placing salt for protection and believe it has a spiritual effect, they risk introducing concepts that are not part of Islam. This does not necessarily mean they intend to go against their faith. Often, they act out of habit or trust in what they were taught by elders. However, good intentions do not replace the need for authenticity. Islam encourages believers to seek knowledge, verify practices, and ensure that their actions are rooted in clear guidance. When a person begins to question whether a practice is supported by Islam, they take the first step towards strengthening their faith. They move from blind imitation to conscious belief, which is a more meaningful and rewarding form of worship. Another important aspect of this issue is how myths spread within communities. In today's world, the spread of information is faster than ever, and not all of it is accurate. Social media, in particular, plays a major role in reinforcing these beliefs. A short video or post claiming that salt removes negative energy or protects against harm can reach thousands of people within minutes. Because these ideas are presented in a convincing or emotionally appealing way, many accept them without questioning their validity. Over time, repetition gives these claims a sense of truth, even if they have no real foundation. This is how myths become normalized. They are shared, repeated, and accepted until they are no longer seen as questionable. In traditional settings, myths often spread through word of mouth. A neighbor may suggest placing salt in a certain area of the home, or a relative may insist on a particular ritual for protection. These suggestions are usually given with sincerity, which makes them even more convincing. People trust those close to them, so they are less likely to question the advice. However, sincerity alone does not guarantee correctness. This is why Islam repeatedly emphasizes the importance of knowledge and verification. Believers are encouraged to ask where a practice comes from, whether it has any basis in the Qur'an or authentic hadith, and whether it aligns with the core principles of Tawheed. The role of fear in spreading these myths cannot be ignored. Many of these practices are rooted in a fear of the unseen, fear of evil eye, jealousy, or harm from jinn. When people are afraid, they become more vulnerable to accepting quick solutions, even if those solutions are not grounded in their faith. The idea of placing salt in a corner or at an entrance feels simple and immediate, giving a sense of control over something that otherwise feels uncertain. However, this sense of control is often an illusion. Islam teaches that true protection comes from Allah alone, and that no object can independently influence unseen forces unless Allah has allowed it. By relying on unverified practices, a person may feel temporarily reassured, but they are not addressing the issue in the way Islam has prescribed. There is also a psychological element to how these beliefs persist. When someone performs a ritual like placing salt and then experiences a period of peace or absence of problems, they may attribute that outcome to the salt. This creates a false sense of cause and effect, reinforcing the belief even further. Over time, this becomes a cycle. Belief leads to action. Action is followed by perceived results, and those results strengthen the belief. Breaking this cycle requires awareness and a willingness to reassess long-held assumptions. It requires a person to step back and ask whether their actions are truly based on Islamic teachings or simply on personal or cultural interpretations. Islam provides clear and authentic alternatives to these practices. Instead of relying on objects or rituals with no basis, believers are guided to seek protection through specific acts of worship. Reciting the Qur'an, especially Surah Al-Baqarah, is known to bring blessings and protection to a home. Regular remembrance of Allah, the Dhikr, making dua, and maintaining a strong connection with Allah are all powerful means of safeguarding oneself from harm. These methods are not only spiritually effective, but also strengthen a person's faith and awareness of Allah's presence in their life. Unlike cultural practices, which may offer temporary comfort, these acts of worship provide lasting peace and clarity. Understanding the difference between culture and religion is essential for every Arabic meme, Arabic scene, Arabic lamb, Arabic meme. Culture can shape how people live, celebrate, and interact, but it should never redefine the core principles of faith. When cultural practices align with Islam, they can be embraced. But when they contradict or add to religious teachings without evidence, they must be reconsidered. This does not mean rejecting one's heritage or disrespecting elders. Rather, it means honoring Arabic alif, Arabic lam, Arabic alif tat hamza, Arabic sin, Arabic lam, Arabic alif, Arabic meme by preserving its authenticity. It also means gently educating others and sharing knowledge in a way that is respectful and compassionate. The process of separating myths from truth is not always easy. It requires patience, humility, and a willingness to learn. Many people may initially resist questioning long-standing practices because they are emotionally attached to them. However, when approached with wisdom and understanding, this process can lead to a deeper appreciation of Islam. It allows individuals to reconnect with the simplicity and purity of their faith, where every action is guided by clear evidence and every belief is rooted in certainty. As awareness grows, communities can gradually move away from superstitions and toward authentic practices. This shift not only corrects misunderstandings, but also strengthens the collective faith of the community. When people rely on Allah alone for protection and guidance, they develop a sense of trust and peace that no cultural ritual can provide. They begin to see that Islam is complete and sufficient, offering guidance for every aspect of life without the need for additions or assumptions. The danger of blindly following traditions is something that Islam addresses with great clarity, yet it remains one of the most common challenges within many communities. When a practice is repeated over generations, it begins to feel natural and unquestionable, even if it has no real foundation in authentic teachings. People often inherit habits from their families without ever pausing to ask where those habits came from or whether they align with Islam. In the case of placing salt in different parts of the home for protection, many individuals do it simply because they have seen their parents or elders do the same. There is a sense of comfort in following what is familiar, and questioning it can sometimes feel like going against one's upbringing. However, Islam does not encourage blind imitation when it comes to matters of belief and worship. Instead, it calls for awareness, understanding, and a conscious effort to ensure that one's actions are rooted in truth. Blindly following traditions can slowly lead a person away from the essence of faith without them even realizing it. When a practice like using salt for protection becomes normalized, it can begin to replace or overshadow the authentic methods of seeking protection that Islam teaches. Instead of turning to Allah through dhikr or reciting the Qur'an, a person might rely on placing salt in corners or near entrances, believing it will keep harm away. This shift, even if small at first, can have deeper implications. It can weaken a person's connection with Allah because their reliance is no longer solely on Him. Islam emphasizes that all benefit and harm come only by the will of Allah, and no object has independent power. When someone attributes protective qualities to something like salt without any evidence, they risk compromising their understanding of Tawheed, which is the foundation of Islamic belief. Another aspect of this issue is the emotional attachment people have to tradition. These practices are often tied to family memories, cultural identity, and a sense of belonging. Letting go of them can feel uncomfortable or even unsettling. Some may fear that abandoning such practices could invite harm, especially if they have grown up hearing warnings about what might happen if they stop. This fear can make it difficult for individuals to question or change their behavior. However, Islam teaches that true safety lies in obedience to Allah, not in holding on to practices that have no basis in the religion. Overcoming this fear requires knowledge and trust. Knowledge to understand what Islam truly teaches, and trust in Allah to know that following His guidance will never lead to harm. The influence of community pressure also plays a role in maintaining these traditions. In many cases, if someone chooses not to follow a common practice, they may face criticism or questioning from others. They might be told that they are being careless or that they are ignoring something important. This can create a sense of doubt, even if they are trying to follow authentic Islamic teachings. Islam, however, encourages believers to stand firm in truth, even if it goes against the norm. It teaches that what matters is not how many people follow a practice, but whether that practice is correct in the sight of Allah. This perspective helps individuals prioritize their faith over social expectations, allowing them to make choices based on knowledge rather than pressure. The danger of blind tradition also lies in how it opens the door to further innovations. Once a person accepts one unverified practice, it becomes easier to accept others. Over time, this can lead to a collection of beliefs and actions that have little connection to Islam. Each addition may seem small, but together they can create a distorted understanding of the religion. This is why Islam places such a strong emphasis on preserving its teachings as they were revealed. The Quran and the Sunnah provide complete guidance, leaving no need for additions based on personal or cultural ideas. By returning to these sources, believers can protect themselves from falling into practices that may lead them away from the truth. Understanding the difference between superstition and faith, particularly through the concept of tawakkul, is essential in addressing practices like using salt for protection. Superstition is based on assumptions, fears, and beliefs that are not supported by evidence. It often involves attributing power to objects, actions, or rituals without any clear basis. Faith, on the other hand, is grounded in certainty and trust in Allah. Tawakkul means relying on Allah with full confidence that He is the source of all protection, provision, and guidance. It is not just a concept, but a state of the heart that influences how a person thinks, feels, and acts. When someone places salt in their home, believing it will protect them from harm, they are engaging in a form of superstition. Even if they still believe in Allah, they are assigning a role to salt that it does not have in Islam. This can subtly weaken their tawakkul because their sense